Hello, everyone. Hopefully, I am coming through loud and clear. We are still battling some technical issues, so just bear with us. I cannot see the chat tonight. So, we're going to get all that worked out. So, I'm going to go ahead and say hello to everybody. Hope everybody has had a great couple of weeks. And I'm glad to be back. So, tonight we're going to dive headfirst into the strangest corners of history, science, and the downright unexplainable, and where Mother Nature has gone straight up rogue. So, grab an umbrella or maybe a hazmat suit because we're about to strap in for some wild tales. And I've got a couple of them tonight, and I think you'll enjoy them. Now, for anybody that is new here tonight, I am your host, Mother Delamort, and this is the Horror Gallery. So let's go ahead and get started. So, despite various theories, the exact cause of this particular incident, known as the Kentucky meat showers, remains a subject of speculation and mystery. Tonight, let's look at a story, like I said, so bizarre, it sounds like it belongs in a science fiction novel, and one of the weirdest events ever recorded. And again, this is referred to as the Kentucky meat showers. Now, on March 3rd of 1876, a farmer's wife, Mrs. Crouch, was making soap on her porch when she reported seeing something started falling from the sky. Now, the phenomenon would also eventually be covered by Scientific America, the New York Times, and other publications. Now, around 11 a.m., the sun's shining, not a cloud in the sight, when out of nowhere, something starts falling. Her grandson, who's nearby, yells, "Grandma, it's snowing." But it but as it hits the ground, they really start to realize this is not snow. It's meat, red,
But as it
raw,
hits the
and
ground,
slapping
they
the
really
earth
start to
like
realize
wet
this is not
rags.
snow. It's
For
meat.
several minutes, chunks rain down over a 100 to 500-yard patch of the farm. Mrs. Crouch later told reporters she thought maybe her husband and son, who were out working, had been torn apart by some freak windstorm. Thankfully, though, they were fine. But the mystery was just beginning. Word spread fast. Neighbors rushed over, gawking at the meat stuck in the fences, scattered across the grass, and even dangling from the trees. One witness, a gentleman by the name of Harrison Gill, said most pieces were about 2 by 2 inches, though some were as big as 4 by 4 inches. Either way, it was a ghastly hellstorm. The Crouches said it was a horse wagon full of meat, which back then was a way of saying a whole freaking lot. And here's where it gets even wilder. Two local guys whose names history didn't even bother to keep decided to, you guess it, taste it. Yep, they picked up the sky meat and took a bite. They said it was either lamb or deer, though it looked more like beef to everyone else. I mean, who does that? Hey, I mean, basically, you're telling yourself, hey, mysterious flesh that just fell from the heavens, let's just go ahead and try a bite. Brave or bonkers, you decide. I wouldn't do it. Now, naturally, this hit the papers like a bombshell. The New York Times ran a headline: "Flesh descends from the from the sky in showers." Then Scientific America jumped in. And soon scientists and curious folks from all over were clamoring for answers. What was this stuff? Where did it come from? Was it a sign from God? As the Crouches themselves thought. A piece was even preserved in glycerin and sent off for study. But I'm going to cover a little bit more of that a little bit later. But let's get to the theories, because this is where the Kentucky meat showers go from weird to what in the world. The first theory came from a guy named Leopold Brandes, writing for a journal called the Samaritan. He said it wasn't meat at all, it was Gnostic, a type of, and I'm going to do my best, cyanobacteria. Gnostics themselves are weird. They're jelly-like substances that swell up when they get wet, earning the nicknames like the witch's butter, or what most people are familiar with, star jelly. Now, Brandes argued that it must have been blown in by the wind and then puffed up on the ground and tricked everyone into thinking it was flesh. Scientific America loved this idea, declaring, "At last, we have a proper explanation. Except here's the problem. On that day, the sky was clear. No rain, no storms. Gnostic, however, needs water to do its thing, and a witness swore this was no jelly. Not to mention that later tests actually debunked this theory." So there's really not a whole lot to explain exactly what happened in Kentucky with the meat falling from the sky, but it does make for a really interesting story and kind of a one-off. There are a few other things that are connected to it, but they're still kind of lumped in as part of the Kentucky meat showers. But next up, we've got something that's more of a cosmic meat theory. Now, my personal favorite for sheer absurdity comes from humorist William Livingston Alden, who wrote in the New York Times that maybe this was a meteor shower. He suggested that just like meteors orbiting the sun, there's a belt of venison, mutton, and beef chunks out there, just spinning around the earth, just waiting to cross paths at any given time. He even threw in a darker twist. Maybe it was finely hashed Kentuckians, caught in a knife fight and flung skyward by a twister. Now, of course, this is ridiculous, but you've got to admire his creativity with this story. Of course, we know now that meat wouldn't survive re-entry through the atmosphere without turning into charcoal. So this one's more fun than fact. But the theory that stuck around and honestly makes the most sense, I'm not saying it makes complete sense, is that it is vulture vomit. You heard that right, vulture puke. Now, Dr. L.D. Kassenbein, writing in the Louisville Medical News, proposed that a flock of vultures, probably turkey vultures, which are common in Kentucky, had gorged themselves on roadkill. Then, for whatever reason, something spooked them in mid-flight. Maybe a hawk, maybe a loud noise. Now, vultures are known to projectile vomit when they are scared. It is simply a defense mechanism, and it lightens their load when they need to take off. However, this would have involved vultures in flight. Now, Kassenbein said if a whole flock barfed all at once, high in the sky, a breeze could spread the chunks over the Crouches' farm. Now, he tested a sample, burned it, and noted that it smelt like rancid mutton. Yeah, it's kind of gross and plausible. Most likely, if you were going to apply like some sort of scientific rationale to this particular incident. Now, scientists got their hands on more samples, 7 to be exact. Now, this is an odd word. I've never seen it before. Histologists like Dr. A. Mead Edwards and Dr. J. W. S. Arnold studied them under microscopes. 2 were lung tissue, 3 were muscle, and 2 were cartilage. No human bits, thankfully, but just animal tissue. Now, this does line up with the vultures projectile vomiting, as this is kind of the diet that they would feed on, a mix of meat, guts, and gristle. The variety of the tissue does fit the idea of the stomach contents for these particular types of birds. Now, and Kentucky's got plenty of these particular vultures. Black and turkey vulture varieties are pretty common in Kentucky. That could have pulled off this particular air meat drop. Now, witnesses didn't report seeing birds, but at a high altitude with good wind, they may have missed them. So, vulture's vomit is the leading contender, but it's not a slam dunk. For one, the area, 100 by 50 yards, is pretty big for a single flock, basically having a puke party. And there's no mention of bile or digestive goo in any of the samples, just cleanish meat. Some folks wonder if a tornado or a waterspout could have sucked up an animal's remains and dropped them, like how fish or frogs sometimes rain down from like really weird weather. It's not uncommon or unheard of. But again, the day was clear, no storms, no twisters. Now, another idea, maybe it was a prank gone wild or gone wrong. You decide on that one. But staging that much fresh meat in 1876 in rural Kentucky feels really like a stretch. Now, one piece of the puzzle is, however, still around. A chunk preserved at Transylvania's University in Lexington, now on display at the Monroe Musnik Medical and Science Museum. Hang on just one second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me okay? Yes, we did fix the echo. I was having a horrible echo. Thank goodness.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, awesome.
Good.
That was
good.
really throwing me off.
And everything's coming through on the chat on our side. I just want to let you know I can see everything on this side.
Okay.
We're using
So, guys, those of you that have just come in, we are still playing around with streaming software. And right now, I cannot see the chats. So it's not that I'm ignoring you. It's just I can't see them. And we went ahead and decided to go ahead and opt for a stream tonight since we've been delayed on our last 2. So just bear with us. We'll get all these bugs worked out eventually. It's just going to take some time. So let's get back to the Kentucky meat showers. So like I said, one piece of the puzzle is still around. A chunk that is preserved at the Transylvania University in Lexington, which is now on display at the Monroe Musnik Medical and Science Museum. It is basically just a little sliver of history floating in a jar that stares back at us, and it basically taunts us. Figure me out, suckers. Now, DNA testing has been tried, but the results are inconclusive. It's either too degraded, maybe, or just not enough to work with. But in 2024, the Bath County History Museum did open up an exhibit about the Kentucky meat showers, bringing that piece home for a bit. So basically, if you're in the area, you can go check that out. Locals shared stories from their ancestors who saw it, which does help to keep the legend alive. Now, the Kentucky meat shower legacy is as much a wonder as it is a basically weirdness. Back in 1876, people didn't have the tech we have now, like mass spectrometry, DNA sequencing. So they debated, speculated, and then basically moved on. Today, we have hazmat teams and viral TikToks within hours. But there's something charming about an old school mystery. It's been referenced in books, podcasts like this one, and even inspired a kid's book by Mick Sullivan called The Meat Shower. Kurt Godey, an art professor at Transylvania, got so obsessed he made meat-flavored jelly beans to recreate the taste. However, basically they were vile, sugary bacon with kind of a bloody metallic kick. Culturally, however, it is a quote quirky footnote in American history. It pops up in talks about the unexplained phenomena like raining fish or blood rain, showing nature's got a twisted sense of humor. And it's a reminder that even in a world of science, some things stay just out of reach. Was it vultures? Probably. But could it be something else? Something we haven't thought of? That's the hook that keeps people coming back to this story. However, funny thing is, 9 days later, on March 12th of 1876, red corpuscles with a vegetable appearance fell over London, Kentucky. So you can Google it, look it up a little bit more if you want. Like I said, there's not a whole lot of information out there about this particular phenomenon because it was pretty much kind of a one-off. But it does make you wonder. So because our theme tonight is It Came from the Sky, now we're going to move on to something that sounds like it's ripped from a gothic horror novel or maybe a biblical play. Imagine looking out your window and seeing raindrops falling, except they're red. Not a little pinkish, but blood red, staining the ground, your car, and your clothes. This isn't some Hollywood special effect. It's blood rain, and it's been freaking people out for centuries. Now, let's start with one of the earliest records, which went way back to 1167. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. This is an Old English history book. It describes a wild scene in Britain, and I quote, "There fell a shower of blood from the sky, so that many men said that it betokened some great matter." Now, in cases like this, people really thought it was a sign. It could be a sign for anything from war to famine, or even the good old fallback, the end of days. And who could blame them, especially during this time period? Honestly, if I saw red rain, I'd probably, at least initially, think the apocalypse was RSVPing us as well. So let's fast forward to 1348. during the Black Plague or the Great Pestilence of all times. And blood rain popped up yet again across Europe. Chroniclers tied it to the plague itself, saying that it was God's wrath, or again, poison air. Now, back then, they didn't have science to lean on, and just basically fear and a knack for storytelling. So this would play really heavy in like historical accounts, reasons for things happening, things along those lines. But blood rain isn't just medieval vibes. It's happening in modern times as well. One of the most famous cases hit Kerala, India in 2001. From July 25th to September 23rd, red rain fell on and across the area. Locals said it started with a loud boom, like thunder or a sonic blast. Then bam, crimson drops. Clothes left on the line turned pink. Wells got murky. And basically people freaked out. One guy, a gentleman by the name of Godfrey Lewis, a physicist, collected samples and found something weird. No dust, no sand, just tiny red particles. And he went full sci-fi with this particular finding, suggesting that they were alien cells from a meteor that had exploded over the Earth. Yeah, extraterrestrial dangling from blood rain. Let that sink in for just a second. So what is really going on with these particular events? It's not, and just to spoiler alert you, it's not literally blood raining from the sky, at least not human or animal blood. The most common explanation is dust. Winds can whip up fine particles from deserts like the Sahara and carry them thousands of miles. Now, in 2015, the UK got a taste when basically the Sahara dust mixed with rain left cars coated with an orange-red film. People called it blood rain, and the Met Office was like, chill out, people, it's just dirt. Same deal in Spain and Greece. Red rain's a regular guest when the African dust basically hitchhikes a ride on the wind. The iron oxide in the dust gives it that rusty, bloody hue. Now, you would think that that's a simple explanation, right? But the odd thing is, Kerala's case wasn't so simple. That dust theory didn't quite fit. No major storms, no desert nearby, and Godfrey Lewis and his team pushed their alien angle, saying that those red particles were biological, with no DNA but weird cell-like structures. They even suggested the meteor carried panspermia, which is basically a life-seeding basically microbes from space. Now, other scientists rolled their eyes at this and said, this is probably just algae. Turns out that it basically was. It was a lichen-forming algae called Timophilia, which was blooming nearby during this particular episode. Now, its spores are red, tiny, and can get airborne in humid weather. And in 2012, study backs up this particular assumption, finding the rain's particles match the algae's profile. No aliens, just nature doing its thing. Still, not every blood rain fits the dust or algae box. Take, for instance, July of 1968 in England. Newspapers screamed about the blood rain in the Midlands. Cars, windows, and even people got splattered with red streaks. No desert dust that day, just a freaky weather event. Some speculated it was industrial pollution, like factory soot mixed with rain, but tests were inconclusive. Or how about Brazil in 2008? a town called Paso Fundo. It doesn't sound like it was that much fundo that day. Now, they saw red rain after a storm, and locals swore it wasn't dust. It was too vivid, too sticky. Now, theories range from pollen to something chemical, but no one nailed it down. And these outliers keep the mystery alive. Historically, blood rain's been a big deal because it's so visceral. In ancient Rome, Pliny the Elder wrote about it as a bad omen. Again, going back to anything from wars to dead emperors, basically, you name it, if there was something bad that could happen, it would probably be blamed if there was something like blood rain before the event. Now, the Iliad even mentions Zeus sending blood rain before a battle, and medieval monks linked it to everything from eclipses to demons. Even today, it's got a grip on us. In 2023, parts of Italy saw red rain from the Sahara dust, and social media went bananas, referring to it as vampire weather, the end times. However, we know it's science, but the primal shiver, it is still there among us. And it is not just red. Blood rain comes in flavors. Yellow rain hit India in 2001, alongside the red, tied to pollen or fungal spores. Black rain fell in Japan after Hiroshima from the nuclear ash, and in Scotland in 1901 from coal dust. Orange rain, that's the Sahara dust again, or sometimes pollen, like in Sweden in 2018. Each color's a clue, nature's way of saying, hey, I've got a story for you. But red's the star. It's the one that stops us cold, makes us wonder if the sky's bleeding for real. On a practical level, blood rain makes a mess. In Kerala, it stained clothes and freaked out farmers, which made them, of course, worry about crops. In the UK, it's a car wash nightmare. Red streaks on your windshield are no joke. Scientists like meteorologists and biologists love it, though, when this happens. It's a chance to study how particulates travel, and how ecosystems connect across the continents. That Sahara dust, now it fertilizes the Amazon. Algae spores, they spread life. What I love about this is how it bridges the gap. Science explains it, but the awe still sticks around. In 2024, Australia had a mini blood shower event. Dust from the outback turned showers pinkish. Locals posted pics, half amazed and half grossed out. Same in Texas that year. Red rain after a dust storm had folks joking about barbecue sauce falling from the sky. It's mundane and magical all at once. Dust algae or whatever, it still feels like the world's pulling a fast one on us. So next time you see weird tinted rain, don't panic. It's probably not the end of days. It's just Earth showing off. It's diversity. Blood rain's been around forever, and it will keep coming. And in the end, blood rain's a global handshake, just with terrible PR. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to a commercial break real quick, and then we'll be back with 2 more stories.
Lost Lunatic Asylum, case number 094. Dr. Mortimer Thornfield recording. Patient 04278, Stephen P. Kitty Cat. Often referring to himself as Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Diagnosis, Morbius Organizers Disorder, or MOD. Observation, patient exhibits an artistically delightful and disturbed mind.
Blazing skies, the world in flames. Nuclear fire, unforgiving claims. I survived through the dust and ash. Came back in time to give you a chance.
We're back. Hello?
All right, I'm flying blind tonight, guys. All right, so we are back. I can't hear the advertisements when they're going, so bear with us. Under construction. So anyway, let's move on to our third story. So next up, let's talk about something so strange it sounds like Mother Nature basically got drunk and decided to prank us all. What would you do basically in this situation? You're walking outside after a storm, expecting puddles or maybe hail, but instead you get fish. That's right, fish smacking you in the head, or basically frogs landing on your windshield. Now, this isn't a cartoon or a bad dream. This really does happen, and it's happened more times than you'd think. In Yuro, Honduras, a sleepy place about 140 miles north of the capital, every year, usually between May and July, something really wild and I think kind of unique happens. A massive storm rolls in with dark clouds, thunder, the works, you name it. And then, as the rain slows, people step outside and find the ground littered with fish. Not dead fish, not dried up fish, but live fish flapping around in the streets, people's yards, and even on rooftops. Sometimes frogs tag along, or even eels, which would completely gross me out, just to keep things a little extra weird, so to speak. Not that they're not already a little weird. Now, locals call it Lluvia de Pies. And I don't know if I said that right, but I'm really good at butchering those names. It basically means the rain of fish. And it's been going on for over a century, maybe even longer. They basically scoop them up, cook them, and throw a humongous festival around this particular event. It's like free grocery delivery from the sky. The story goes back, basically the story behind it, goes back to the 1860s, and it is tied to a legend about a Spanish priest by the name of Father Jose Manuel Sabria. He saw that the town was starving and, dropping to his knees, prayed for a miracle to feed them. 3 days later, fish started falling, and Euros never looked back. They say it's God answering their prayers and a yearly blessing. One witness in the 1990s, a missionary named Mabel Dillard, Mabel Dillard, wrote about it. And basically, they stated the ground was covered with little silver fish jumping like they were still in the water. And basically, kids ran around catching them in buckets. It's not just a tale. There are photos, videos, and even National Geographic covered this particular event in 2010. But how does this happen? Is it divine intervention or something less heavenly? Now, science has a pretty solid guess. Basically, water spouts or tornadoes. These storms can act like giant vacuums, sucking up water and anything swimming in it, from rivers, lakes, or swamps. In Honduras, the Ogden River's nearby, full of small sardine-like fish that match what rains down. The storm lifts them miles into the sky, carries them over land, and then when the wind dies, basically plop, you've got fish showers. And it's the same deal with frogs. Swampy areas get hit, and suddenly it's an amphibious apocalypse. Waterspouts have been spotted off Honduras's coast, and tornadoes are not a rare occurrence inland. It's not a perfect explanation, of course. Some fish land too far from water sources, but it is the best that we have so far. And Euro's not alone. This happens worldwide. In 1861, Singapore got hammered with a fish rain. Catfish and perch basically rained down all over the streets during and after a storm. In 1844, near Shelby, when tiny frogs rained after a squall, witnesses said they were as thick as snowflakes. Even the U.S. gets in on this. Louisiana saw a fish drop in 1947 and in 2017. And in 2017, an Alabama school had tadpoles splatter their playground. Now, of course, the kids thought it was absolutely awesome. The teachers probably not so much. Now, one of my favorite cases is from 1894 in Germany, and this is right up my alley. This particular town in Germany is Essen, to be exact. Now, basically what happened is a tornado whipped through, and afterwards, people, coming out of their homes after the storm, found fish, crabs, and mussels scattered everywhere. And what was really kind of cool, some were frozen solid. Others were wiggling and still alive. Now, scientists figured they had been yanked from the Rhine River, which was about 20 miles away, and basically flash frozen in the storm's upper reaches before dropping to the ground. It was basically like nature's version of a seafood platter, all chilled and delivered. And then there's Australia in 2010 in Lajamanu, a desert town which is about 400 miles from the coast. Live spangled perch rained down, some landing in buckets still kicking. Now, locals basically were like, we don't have fish out this far. However, a meteorologist blamed it as a freak updraft, fish airlifted from who knows where. But it's not always fish and frogs. History's gotten weirder raindrops, basically. In 1969, in Punta Gorda, Florida, basically got pelted with golf balls after a tornado hit a country club and basically threw hundreds of them bouncing off the roofs. Mexico, in 1997, had worms rain down. Little wigglers were everywhere after that storm. And in 2007, Serbia reported a frog fall so thick that it clogged drains. A villager told Reuters, and I quote, "I thought maybe a plane carrying frogs had basically exploded." So let's go back to Euro, where basically they have this festival. The fish are small, usually 3 to 6 inches, perfect for frying with some lime and salt. They're freshwater species, not ocean fish, which does fit with the river theory. But here's the interesting kicker. Sometimes there are species that are not found locally. In 2005, a biologist noted that some didn't even match Euro's waterways. Did they come from underground caves, basically sucked up through fissures or cracks? They really don't know. So there is a little bit of a mystery there. I mean, most of this does make sense. But I do like when there's a little bit of a mystery there, to where it just kind of makes you scratch your head. Now, this one I'm going to tell you may be a trigger alert for some. So we're going to talk about something that sounds like it's straight out of a horror movie. Matter of fact, they kind of made a horror movie about this particular species back in the day. Or maybe it would remind you of a nightmare that you would rather forget. Imagine stepping outside, looking up at the sky, and instead of raindrops or snowflakes, you see spiders, thousands of them. And it's not as rare as you might think. So basically, we're going to grab an umbrella or maybe a flamethrower, and let's unpack this creepy, crawly phenomenon. This is the story of when it rained spiders. One of the most famous incidents happened in May of 2015 in Goulburn, which is a small town in Australia's southern tablelands. It's about 120 miles from Sydney. That morning, residents awoke to what they thought was a light dusting of snow. But as they got closer, they realized it wasn't snow at all. It was spider webs. Millions of tiny spiders had descended from the sky, covering homes, trees, and fields with basically a silky blanket. One local, a gentleman by the name of Ian Watson, took to Facebook and wrote, and I quote, "Anyone else experiencing this angel hair or maybe millions of spiders falling from the sky right now? My home is covered in them. Someone call the scientists." And honestly, I don't blame him for freaking out. Imagine spiders getting tangled in your beard or in your hair or creeping across your porch. It is basically like the stuff of nightmares. But this wasn't a one-off fluke. Similar events have been reported across the globe, like in Brazil in 2013 and in 2019, or even in Texas after heavy rains. So what is going on here? What causes this to happen? Are spiders just deciding to stage a mass invasion from the heavens? Not quite. There's actually a scientific explanation behind this, and it's called ballooning. Spiders, usually small ones or juveniles, have this incredible trick up their sleeves, or I guess you could say up their spinnerets. They climb to a high point, like a tree or a bush, stick their butts in the air, wave, "Goodbye, goodbye," and release strands of silk. That silk catches the wind, or sometimes even electric fields in the atmosphere, and off they go, floating through the sky like tiny paragliders. They can travel hundreds of miles in this particular way, reaching heights of up to 3 miles above the ground. It's actually pretty cool. Now, ballooning happens all the time. Scientists say there are probably spiders floating around us right now, and we don't even notice. But what turns this into a spider rain is what a whole bunch of them, and basically a whole bunch or even millions, what causes that and basically makes them decide to take flight all at once. Why does this happen? Well, it's often tied to specific conditions. For instance, in Australia, late in autumn in May is a prime ballooning season for certain small spiders, like sheetweb weavers or money spiders. If the weather shifts suddenly, say a strong wind or a change in temperature, all those spiders can lift off together and then land in the same spot when the wind dies down. That's when you get scenes like in Goulburn, where it looks like the sky is snowing spiders. Another trigger that can cause this to happen can be survival. Take what happened in Pakistan in 2010. After a devastating flood swept basically through that area or that country, millions of spiders ballooned out of there to escape the rising waters. They landed in trees and fields, weaving massive webs that actually did help to eat up all the mosquitoes that bred from the floodwaters. The locals didn't mind this particular instance so much. Better spiders than malaria. Or, for instance, in Australia in 2021, heavy rains and flooding sent spiders fleeing again, blanketing the countryside with webs that stretch for miles. It's like nature's way of hitting the reset button. Spiders are often the first to recolonize in areas after a disaster, which is kind of interesting. I never really realized that, but it does make sense. Now let's jump across the globe to Brazil for a minute, because their spider reign is a little different and maybe even creepier. In 2013, in San Antonio de Platina, and I know I probably butchered that, a video went viral showing thousands of spiders dangling from telephone wires, looking like they were showering down on the town. Then in 2019, in Minas Gerais, a child named Joao Pedro Martinelli Fonseca filmed, so 4 names, filmed a sky full of black dots while visiting his grandparents on their farm. He told a local paper he was stunned and scared, especially when one fell through the car window. His grandmother, though, was like, "Oh yeah, this happens all the time when it's hot." Now, turns out these were Parawixia bistrata, which is a rare social spider species. They don't just balloon, they build giant, nearly invisible sky webs to catch prey together that can sometimes stretch 13 feet wide and 10 feet thick. So basically, it is a floating spider web. And here's the fun twist. In January of 2025, just a couple of months ago, footage from an area in Brazil showed hundreds of spiders seemingly falling from the sky. Social media went wild, with people calling it spider heaven or, again, the spider apocalypse. But experts chimed in saying, nope, it's basically a mating ritual. Biologist Kieran Passo explained that these spiders were on a massive web, engaging in what he called basically a spider orgy. The females store sperm from multiple males to make their offspring tougher. Once the party's over, they drop down and it looks like rain. So not only are spiders raining down, they're doing it basically with style. Now, before you start packing your bags to move to a spider-free planet, here's the good news. These are mostly harmless spiders when it comes to humans. The spiders involved are usually tiny, think pencil eraser size, and their venom, if they have any at all, isn't usually strong enough to bother us. In fact, they're actually doing us a favor by eating pests like flies and mosquitoes. But I'll admit there is a downside when millions of spiders land in one spot. Their webs can smother crops or cover your house in a spooky shroud. It's not dangerous, but it's definitely not a vibe many people really go for. So why does this keep happening in places like Australia and Brazil? Well, it's a mix of climate and spider behavior. Australia's got the perfect combination of wide open spaces, seasonal weather shifts, and a ton of small spider species that love to balloon. Brazil's hot, humid summers makes it ideal for social spiders to thrive and build their sky nets. And honestly, it's not just them. Spider ballooning has been spotted in the US, the UK, and even Greece. Back in 2007, Texas saw mega webs in trees after a heavy rain and it did freak out a lot of people. No matter where you are, if the conditions are right, you might just look up and see a spider parachuting, basically the whole team coming your way. As wild as it sounds, spider rain is a reminder of how amazing and resilient nature can be. These little critters have figured out how to turn silk into a superpower. So basically, next time you're outside and feel a little tickle on the back of your neck, maybe give the sky a quick glance. So that's what we have tonight. I hope you enjoyed that. I am really glad to be back. And like I said, this is a work in progress. We have trying different streaming software to see which one fits us the best. And we're not done testing this one. So I will be back later this month with more of what you normally associate with the horror gallery. But I hope you did enjoy that. We did want to give you kind of at least some sort of stream since we have been absent for the last few weeks. So I'm going to wish you guys pleasant nightmares and see you soon. Bye.
I know set the world on fire. I know the song of a